Kid and Law's situation in the current One Piece story is far from ideal. Both of them were taken down by Yonko, Shanks and Blackbeard respectively, where one is looking off a bit worse than the other also respectively. But I'm here to tell you both how and why these guys will return to the story, and how their experiences will serve to make them far stronger than they are now. And Oda's made it pretty obvious how that is going to happen. So let's get into it. And we'll start by the manner in which they both received their latest losses. Both Kid and Law used the epitome of their awakened Devil Fruit's power in Damned Punk and K-Room, both of which, in the end, are not enough to overcome their adversaries. The reason why? Haki and the lack thereof. Where in Kid's case it's more of both, and for Law it's more of just the latter. For Kid, the difference in Haki is shoved and quite literally blown up in his face when his strongest attack isn't even allowed to land, thanks to Shanks' superior observation Haki, and for the first time in his life, at least on screen, he gets hit by a Conqueror's Haki infused attack, which then blows the damned punk right up in his face, together with his first mate Killer. As for Law, one black vortex is all we need to see to understand what unfolded afterwards, because Trafalgar D. Waterloo without being able to use his Devil Fruit is nothing but a bomb. The point I'm trying to make here is when left with only being able to use Haki against Emperors and their fruits just won't suffice, they stand no chance against the primary competitors. Unlike their rival Luffy, who can contend with a Yonko without the use of his gears, aka his Devil Fruit, Kid and Law can only put up a good fight against one when they team up, and even then, that Emperor does not use the peak of their Haki against them in Advanced Conqueror's Haki. Though I don't believe Oda's done that simply because he's forgotten, no. To go out of his way to show Big Mom can use Conqueror's Infusion, and for her not to use it against Kid and Law only makes me come to one conclusion. Had she used it, she would have won, and Oda knows that. Now it's for that fact that I also believe Big Mom isn't down and out yet for the story, because her full power has therefore never been seen. But the schematics of her return will be left for another video, so subscribe for that and more One Piece content in the future. Thank you very much. Now it's in the same arc a couple of chapters later, after Kid and Law beat Big Mom using their Devil Fruits, that an interesting quote comes from the strongest creature in the world, Kaido. And it's one that particularly stands out because to me, it fully supports the idea that Kid and Law have lackluster Haki, and how that fact ultimately got exposed by the Emperors later on in the Egghead arc. Quote, "Play all the games you want, but abilities alone cannot conquer the world. The world is convenient that way. Roger didn't have any fruit powers because only Haki can transcend all." And quote. If Kid and Law want to be serious contenders for the One Piece, it's clear that they can't just rely on their fruit powers anymore, which they've already maxed out and where there is simply no room for improvement. If they want to stop playing games and actually become worthy of the price on their heads, they're going to have to up their Haki game, though I'd argue one's a bit ahead of the other. Though not for long, I project. And that's because Law has actually experienced the peak of Haki for himself, wherein which he couldn't shambles Big Mom or Kaido away with his room due to the absolutely absurd levels of Haki both of them were exuding. And he has in fact put that experience to use by countering Doku's fruit in his fight against the Blackbeard pirates. Now I'm sure Kid would also put that knowledge to use since he was the one that actually questioned on why Law couldn't teleport them away, but of course he did not fight a man with a Devil Fruit, and then again he didn't even have the time to apply any knowledge he might have gained from the fight on the rooftop. Like for example knowing you can hit Kaido with physical blows / Rio Haki. Now though it might seem like a complete loss for Kid against Shanks, there's one thing I believe Kid has gained, and that is being hit by a Conqueror's infused attack, and let me just say, we have seen what wonders it has done for the main character. And that's also the reason why I said I'd project him to be better than Law in terms of a general power standpoint in the future. And that he will overtake him, because let's be real, Law just has far better feats than Kid, as of right now in the current story. And the general consensus amongst fans is that Law is definitely better than Kid in a power standpoint. And as I mentioned before, Big Mom never using Advanced Conqueror's Haki against Kid or Law, dragging Kid out of the fight against Kaido just before Luffy learns ACOC, so Kid can't see it, I get the impression Oda's been saving Kid's first interaction with Advanced Conqueror's Haki, because when he finally does, he would absolutely want to learn it, especially if it's the thing that almost killed him and his entire crew, which we still don't know the current location or status of. Unlike with Law and Beppo, who are currently heading towards an unnamed island, where I believe they'll ponder on their setback and take a page out of Luffy's book, which is training. Now with no Conqueror's Haki, his skill ceiling is obviously going to be limited, but his awakening puts him at a very good place for now, and he can make considerable gains in armament and observation, of course. He has commented on Luffy not touching Kaido in their clash, which means that he knows what real Haki is, and considering his demeanor and how calculated Law is and how he just tends to look at situations, I wouldn't be surprised if he learns Future Sight in a Haki Bloom towards the end of the series, after consolidating his grasp on observation Haki. I don't think it's as likely as him learning Ryo, but you never know. And of course it won't take 2 years for Law to start or finish his training, because he isn't as far behind in Haki as Luffy was at the beginning of the time skip. I believe this same scenario will happen to Kid as well, but it's less clear on how he'll end up on land since, well, he's sinking to the ocean floor. However, I think it is a whirlpool of all things that will save Kid and Killer, because it's done that for characters previously in the story, more so out of convenience and to progress the plot. But you can't just have one appear out of nowhere, of course, so I think the answer in how that happens is in what Kid mentions just after Wano, and that is the man marked by flames, accompanied by a black ship and whirlpools that will sink any ship coming near. I have my doubts on whether this person, whoever they are, ends up like a mentor figure to Kid, kind of like Rayleigh to Luffy, because Kid doesn't strike me as the type of person to receive training from anyone. But if the man marked by flames does end up being some kind of powerful pirate or figure from the past like Rayleigh, and they somehow end up training Kid or Killer in the ways of Haki, I am going to put my money on them being a Rocks pirate, to juxtapose Luffy's mentor being a Roger pirate. It could be anyone really, but I just don't think it's Scopper or anything like that, since I don't think the Roger pirates would be particularly fond of a pirate like Kid. This training arc surely would give Kid advanced Conqueror's Haki, since again it would be the power that almost killed him in this scenario, and he'd have experienced that power firsthand. He'd also make strides in armament Haki, which I attribute to his more aggressive personality. Now with me proposing training arcs as the next step for Law and Kid, and one possibly getting a mentor like Luffy, it's clear I'm comparing their mutual situation to Luffy's in Sabaody Archipelago, severely unprepared for the seas ahead and therefore losing your entire pirate crew. And now something I recall from Rayleigh when he asked Luffy to train with him is if he were to go out into the new world like that, the same fate would befall on him yet again, and considering the positions of a lot of the supernova after the time skip that they found themselves in or are currently in, like working under Yonko, dead, currently dying, Law and Kid's fate was bound to occur. Even with 2 years of training, Luffy found himself in dire situations time and time again, but it's in those moments that the 2 years of training really bails Luffy out by a lot. Having an extra transformation up his sleeve is obvious, of course, but I think more importantly than that, and helpful in the long run, it's the 2 years that set up the foundation for what people like to call Haki Blooms. Remembering Rayleigh's teachings during his fight against Katakuri to learn Future Sight, remembering Rayleigh's and Sentomaru's feats, and how that clues him in on real Haki, and then having the intelligence in Haki to realize Kaido hit him with a advanced Conqueror's Haki attack, are all examples of Haki Blooms, and most of it I'd argue comes from the 2-year training. If Kid and Law really do go down on this training session, wherever and whenever that may be, the strength gains from their near-death fights would increase exponentially due to said Haki Blooms, but because they don't have that foundation that Luffy has, they don't have the necessary level in Haki currently to improve mid-fights by great margins like Luffy does. Now I didn't really have any space to put this anywhere in the video, so I'll just put it at the end. But I kind of wanted to discuss a little bit on where Kid and Law lie in terms of power in the current One Piece manga and just at this point in the story. I have them below Zoro and Yamato definitively. And that's because I believe those four are at the same tier of power. with Kid and Law representing the peak of Devil Fruits in Awakening, and Zoro and Yamato representing the peak of Haki in terms of Advanced Conqueror's Haki. Now, if you remember the quote that I mentioned earlier with Kaido saying that Haki transcends all, I believe that Oda here has picked a side in terms of which of the two are stronger. Now, if we look between Kid and Law themselves, they should, on paper at least, be equal to each other, with Law obviously having better feats, as well as arguably the better Devil Fruit. But I think in Oda's mind, the both of them are at the same tier of power, practically equal, and if they were to fight, they would go extreme diff with each other. Though I will say it is pretty interesting that the man that has a better knowledge on Haki actually performs better against his respective emperor than the other. Which, all I'm saying is, Haki does transcend all. But I guess you could just interpret that as Shanks being stronger than Blackbeard, if you wish. But that's all from me today. Thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you think. Goodbye.